In January 1982, two young women vanished into the cold Colorado night, sparking one of the most haunting double mysteries in American history.
Barbara Bobby Jo Oberholzer, 29, left her office in Breckenridge after a work party and never made it home.
The next day, her husband Jeff found her belongings scattered along Hoosier Pass: gloves, tissues, a backpack, and even her driver's license.
The search team discovered her body nearby, shot twice, a plastic zip tie still around her wrist.
Investigators noticed one chilling clue: a single orange sock lying near her remains. 6 months later, another missing woman, 21-year-old Annette Schnee, was discovered in a creek bed 20 miles away, shot and wearing the matching orange sock.
The orange socks tied the cases together, proving both women had been killed by the same man. But the killer remained a phantom for nearly 40 years, the case turning colder with every passing winter.
The bizarre twist is that the killer had actually been rescued by police the very night of the murders. A miner named Alan Lee Phillips had been pulled to safety after signaling SOS from his truck, but nobody realized he was fleeing a double murder.
For decades, suspicion never touched him, while families of the victims pleaded for justice.
Finally, in 2020, investigators used genetic genealogy to track DNA from the crime scene to Phillips's family tree.
A discarded napkin Phillips used in public was secretly collected, tested, and matched perfectly to DNA left on the victims.
After nearly 4 decades, Alan Lee Phillips was arrested in 2021, finally exposed as the murderer.
In 2022, he was convicted of the murders of both women, ending one of Colorado's most chilling cold cases. The haunting part is this: the very night he killed 2 women, fate spared his own life in a blizzard, while theirs were lost forever.
Case number 2, the Sherri Rasmussen murder. On a February morning in 1986, a quiet Los Angeles condo became the stage for a murder that would remain unsolved for more than 2 decades.
Inside, 29-year-old Sherri Rasmussen was found brutally beaten and shot, her body wrapped in a quilt, a burglary staged to mask the truth.
Sherri had been married just 3 months earlier to John Rutan, an engineer she deeply loved.
Detectives at the time believed the crime was a botched burglary. 2 men supposedly surprised her during a daytime robbery.
But Sherri's parents insisted she was being harassed by one specific woman, her husband's ex-girlfriend, a police officer named Stephanie Lazarus.
Lazarus had dated John before his marriage to Sherri and, according to friends, never fully let go.
At the crime scene, detectives had swabbed a bite mark on Sherri's arm and collected DNA. But in the 1980s, testing technology was primitive.
For years, the sample sat frozen in a police storage facility, waiting for science to catch up.
By the 2000s, DNA technology had advanced, and cold case detectives reopened the Rasmussen file.
The DNA profile revealed the killer was a woman, not a man, shattering the original burglary theory. Detectives turned back to the one name Sherri's family had always mentioned: Stephanie Lazarus.
In 2009, investigators secretly followed Lazarus to a Costco, where she tossed a drinking cup into the trash.
The discarded cup was tested, and the DNA matched the bite mark from 1986.
The shocking truth emerged. An LAPD detective had murdered her ex-boyfriend's wife out of jealousy.
In 2012, Lazarus was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years to life.
And in 2023, at a parole hearing, she admitted to the crime at last, confirming what Sherri's family had known all along.
The case proved that even those sworn to uphold the law can hide the darkest of secrets.
Case number 3, the murder of Michelle Martinko. On December 19, 1979, the festive glow of Christmas lights couldn't hide the tragedy waiting in the parking lot of a Cedar Rapids mall.
18-year-old Michelle Martinko had gone to Westdale Mall to shop for a winter coat, never realizing it would be her last trip. Later that night, her parents grew worried when she didn't come home and reported her missing. Hours later, police found Michelle's car in the mall parking lot, and inside, her lifeless body.
She had been stabbed multiple times, with clear signs she had fought back against her killer.
Detectives collected blood that did not belong to Michelle, DNA evidence that would sit unanswered for decades. Despite hundreds of interviews and composite sketches, no suspect was ever identified.
The case haunted Cedar Rapids for nearly 40 years, with Michelle's family waiting desperately for justice.
By the late 2000s, detectives turned to a new tool, genetic genealogy, to trace the unknown DNA. In 2018, investigators narrowed the suspect pool to one man, Jerry Lynn Burns, a businessman living just miles away.
To confirm their suspicion, they followed him to a restaurant and watched him drink a soda.
When he left, detectives retrieved the discarded straw from the trash. Tests revealed the DNA from the straw matched perfectly with the blood found in Michelle's car in 1979. In December 2018, nearly 40 years after the crime, Jerry Lynn Burns was arrested for Michelle's murder.
During questioning, Burns could not explain why his DNA was at the crime scene.
In 2020, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
For Michelle's family, the twist was surreal. Justice had come from something as ordinary as a discarded soda straw.
In 1985, hunters walking through Bear Brook State Park in New Hampshire stumbled upon a mysterious blue barrel hidden in the woods.
Inside were the dismembered remains of a woman and a young girl, both unidentified. 15 years later, in 2000, another barrel was discovered just 100 yards away, with the bodies of 2 more little girls inside.
The park now hid 4 victims in total, but nobody knew who they were or who had killed them.
For years, the case was known only as the Bear Brook Murders, one of New Hampshire's darkest mysteries. Police had no names, no suspects, and almost no leads, just barrels in the woods and 4 silent victims. The only clue came from forensic anthropology. The victims were a woman in her late 20s and 3 little girls, all murdered in the late 1970s or early 1980s.
Decades passed before DNA testing revealed a shocking connection. 3 of the victims were related to each other.
But the 4th girl was not related. Her identity remained a mystery for years longer. The killer's identity finally came into focus. Terry Pater Rasmussen, a drifter who used countless false names.
Rasmussen was known as the chameleon killer because he constantly reinvented himself with new identities.
He had posed as Bob Evans, Larry Vanner, and other names while moving across America. In 2017, forensic genealogy identified 3 victims as Marley's Honeychurch and her daughters, Marie Vaughn and Sarah McWanners.
The discovery connected Rasmussen directly to their murders, but one victim still had no name.
Forensic genealogy continued to work in the background, digging through distant DNA matches to trace her family.
Finally, in September 2025, authorities revealed the last victim's identity, Sherri Rasmussen, the biological daughter of the killer himself.
This meant Rasmussen had murdered not only an unrelated family, but also his own child.
Sherri's mother, believed to be another of Rasmussen's partners, has never been found.
The Bear Brook case became one of the first in the U.S. to use forensic genetic genealogy on both victims and killers.
It showed how science could give the voiceless their names back, even decades after death. The forest that once hid their remains now holds a memorial where families and strangers come to mourn.
The barrels are gone, but the scars remain, both on the land and in the hearts of the families. Even in death, Rasmussen had tried to erase the truth, but science brought it all back into the light.
The story of Bear Brook reminds us that killers can change their names, but DNA never lies.
And because of that, 4 victims who were once only known as Barrel Children now have their names and their justice.
Case number 5, the murder of Angie Dodge. On June 13, 1996, the small town of Idaho Falls woke up to a tragedy that would haunt it for decades. 18-year-old Angie Dodge, a vibrant young woman with her whole future ahead, was found murdered in her apartment.
The discovery shook Idaho Falls, a town where violent crime was almost unheard of.
Police quickly felt pressure to solve the crime, and within weeks, suspicion fell on a 20-year-old man named Christopher Tapp. Tapp was interrogated for over 100 hours, pressured and coerced into giving a confession. Despite glaring problems in the investigation, including inconsistencies in his statements, his confession sealed his fate. In 1998, Christopher Tapp was convicted of murder and sentenced to 30 years to life.
But there was one glaring problem. The DNA evidence at the crime scene did not match him. For more than 20 years, Angie's mother, Carol Dodge, fought relentlessly to prove Tapp's innocence and find the real killer. Carol even met with Tapp in prison, convinced he was not her daughter's killer. By the 2010s, a new technique, forensic genetic genealogy, was changing the landscape of criminal investigations.
In 2019, investigators used genealogy to track the unknown DNA to one man, Brian Lee Dripps Sr. Dripps lived across the street from Angie at the time of her murder.
Shockingly, he had even been questioned by police in 1996, but slipped through the cracks.
To confirm the match, police collected a cigarette butt he discussed.
The DNA on the cigarette matched perfectly with the crime scene sample from 1996.
After 23 years of mystery, the real killer had finally been identified.
In 2019, Dripps was arrested and confessed to the murder, admitting he had acted alone.
That same year, Christopher Tapp was fully exonerated after spending over 20 years in prison for a crime he did not commit.
The courtroom erupted in tears of relief when Tapp's conviction was vacated.
For Carol Dodge, it was bittersweet. Her daughter's killer was caught, but the decades of wrongful imprisonment weighed heavily.
The case highlighted both the failures of police interrogation and the power of modern forensic science. In 2021, Brian Dripps pleaded guilty to the rape and murder of Angie Dodge and was sentenced to life in prison.
For the first time in decades, Angie's family felt a measure of justice, though nothing could bring her back.
The story of Angie Dodge proves that even when justice is delayed, truth can still find its way into the light.